and then we can get started. Yeah.
Sure, sure, of course. So, hello everyone. My name is Ankit. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Yeah, really sorry for not being present over there. A bunch of things happened, but boring story. I'm just having a really bad day. So, my cursor is also acting up. So, instead of having live demos, I took screenshots and small videos instead. Um, yeah, So my name is Ankit. I've been a data scientist for the past 7, 8 years. I have worked in companies like Salesforce, Delta Airlines, Deutsche Telekom Germany, etc. And one of the key things that all of these companies look for is that they have massive bloat in their analytics teams, right? So you have like 20 different analytics teams reporting to 20 different orgs, creating dashboards, telling stories, and then data scientists on top making sure that things go well. Using Cursor, for some of my employers, previously just using AI tools and other automations, we were able to automate the entire business analytics, data analytics, and data science workflow. And today, that is what we are going to talk about. So I'll quickly share my screen, and this is more of a very condensed version because I understand that not everyone is from a data background. So we'll spend the next 3, 4 minutes trying to understand that what so many data teams really do inside of a company. And then henceforth, we'll be understanding how we can just automate that for large scale orgs. So I hope my screen is visible.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so there are like 6 stages of data science that usually happens in a company. The first one is data ingestion. The biggest problem with data ingestion is, now imagine if you're a massive company. We are not talking about a small startup that has like few petabytes of data. We are talking about a massive company that has, let's say, exabytes of data, right? And all of this data comes from multiple regions and multiple data clusters. So all of these data have their own compliance issues. So if something comes from Europe, there is so much paper involved. If something comes from the US, it has its own HIPAA compliance. If something is from India, it has to be stored in an Indian server. So there is so much nuance to every single data processing that happens, all data ingestion that happens. So the first layer is data ingestion. The second is data engineering. The bigger tasks for these big companies is to ensure data quality. Data quality insurance means that in, let's say, in a pharmacological data, right? So you get vaccination related information or diagnosis related information. You want all of that to be in one standardized format, a format that is acceptable across teams within your company. And also, you want not all of your data to be blank or dummy or hmm, shitty data so that your data analytics and data science teams can work with it. And then there is data processing, which you all are aware of. And then data science, which everyone is aware of. EDA means making plots, and then presentation design basically refers to everything that happens behind the scenes in a data analytics department. Data analytics does data processing plus data engineering plus data ingestion plus business analytics department, which does EDA, that is plotting, plus presentation design plus data science department, that is your data science department in the purple. So they all work in tandem, and then there are managers and then managers over them. And you'll see that there are several consultants who work on these data cleaning, data processing, etc. Of course, we cannot automate compliance and data processing using Cursor for very big orgs because that is a very cumbersome process. Although at my current org, which I would not like to name, we have currently signed $22 million worth of API credits, and we have a $7 to $8 million contract with Cursor right now as we speak. So yeah, so some data engineering and data science professionals, we were able to bring in Cursor for all of them. So, but organizations that I freelance with are usually smaller organizations. So for them, data processing, data cleaning can also be automated at a small extent. Beyond this, which is data engineering, data processing, data science, EDA, and presentation design, all of these 5 stages is something that we would want to automate using Cursor. On the background, are there any questions?
Do we have any question?
Yeah, so the API credits is in this. Yeah, so you mentioned API credits,
Mhm.
$22 million. So, what APIs are those?
So we are working with this company. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to name them, but they are a provider of programming related APIs. So we have Claude Code as well as GPT Codex plus Microsoft Copilot, depending on who likes what. So because my current org has nearly 15 to 20,000 developers around the world. So I think, yeah.
So AI credits, right? Basically.
AI credits, yeah, API credits for AI development. Yeah.
I think you can continue.
Sure. Okay. So first off, whenever we are starting, I think in the previous talk, we discussed about cursor rules and how to set things up. So as soon as we are starting, we would be setting up a folder structure that looks like this. The very first folder structure would be cursor rules. There can be multiple cursor rules. So what I like to do is, because hidden files are super hard to go by, I just create a cursor/rules folder. And over there, you can later on, you can end up hiding this by using a dot cursor, but I create a one hidden dot cursor and one visible dot cursor so that you can actually just have a look at your rules. So yeah, there are some cursor rules. And then, so overview is basically a simple how do you want to get your project structured. So you'll say that this is a data science project, you're working on a pharma product, or you're working on a telecommunications product, or you're working on an airline product, or you're working on a D2C retail product, or so on and so forth. So this will be a basic background overview. Notebook.mdc is your basic notebook structure. So how do you want to structure your notebook? Data scientists and data analysts love using Jupyter notebooks. Cursor can create Jupyter notebooks in one shot, but it has its own default structure to create Jupyter notebooks. And its structure is typical of a lot of these GitHub Kaggle repositories, because a lot of Claude plus Gemini has been trained on Kaggle repositories. So you will see that it is very Kaggle coded. So a lot of data scientists don't want Kaggle coded. So for example, what I like in my Jupyter notebook is that my first 5-6 rows will be just empty sequels. So all the sequels that we have run behind the scenes will be in the first 5-6 rows. Followed by that, some empty cells, then all the imports, and then followed by everything else. So you can structure your notebook.mdc in a certain format using your markdown. Feature engineering.mdc. So depending if you're working on a retail, or so every feature will have its own nuance. So you will be entering that. So let's say in retail data, it is that these are real-time features. So you would be taking a look back and a look forward period for time series analysis or something like that. So all of that would be in your feature engineering. Explainability, how much explainability do you want to insert? The fun part is about plotting. What we will be mentioning in each of these is that insert all the plots in a /plot. So this plots folder will contain all the plots. Now, the way I like to structure my plots folder is in different slides, because my stakeholders will ask for slides. So in this plots, I will have the names of the multiple presentations that I'm creating. So there is like PPT1, PPT2, PPT3. Inside of each PPT, whichever slide, whichever plots we would be using, I would mention that. So in your overview, you can mention that we are going to do an analysis on for this, and it will be stored in PPT1. So make sure everything is stored in PPT1. You can add these in your overview, and you can also add this in your plot, because this is not global. So in your local folders, you would have to add these in your cursor. Now let's make sure that all the plots are within one folder. How we are going to use it down the line is using cursor. We will be creating PPTs. And cursor can pick up these relevant images from this plots folder to put in the relevant slides. And it works really well. Like all of my presentations right now are created by cursor using this format. So this simple table structure, and then experiment template.yaml, that's a basic simple experiment template. So how you are going to run your experiments over there. People who work with causal inferences, if there is anyone, it's a very niche domain, but if anyone works with causal inferences, you can add a /causal folder as well, where you can store all your digraphs. Digraphs are like your dot files, DOT files, not dot files, but DOT files. And these files can be used to create your graph viz plot or your other plots. So that is another thing. Any questions on the folder structure?
Anyone questions? We are good. No questions. No questions.
No question.
Okay. One other thing that I like doing is, so let's say I want plots that look like McKinsey plots. So in this plots folder, I will create a template folder. And what I'll do is I will take, let's say, a sample plot that I already like. So I'll just take screenshots from there and I'll put that. Now there are several ways to automate that as well. You can just use a PPT to JPG converter or one of those tools online, but you can just put all the JPGs in one file. Now what that does is, let's say your company follows a specific PPT template or a structure, you can just put that there. You can also add a template folder which will have your company logo and everything in all your presentations. So that works really well with Cursor, and Cursor is usually able to abide by it. Now, the very first thing was data ingestion and how you are going to work with it. Now, Cursor has a inbuilt Databricks integration. Databricks is the most popularly used uh, data IDE is how I like to call it, because it has notebooks, it has data lakes, it has data engineering, it has Airflow like workflows, it has its own DAGs, it has compute clusters from AWS, etc. So Cursor natively supports Databricks, and you can attach your Cursor run to your Databricks clusters. Now, how does that help is because data workloads are massive. You can immediately just connect to your Databricks and it will be able to run on your current Databricks cluster. But you will ask me that, Ankit, maybe we don't need Databricks. So Cursor has MCP integration. Everyone is aware of that. The fun part is that Cursor supports PostgreSQL on an MCP. Now, the fun part about having PostgreSQL on an MCP is not only does it support Postgre, it supports every derivative database of Postgre. So things like I don't know how niche, but like DuckDB or some Redshift related DBs can directly be supported on Postgre. So let's say you have some, I don't know, iceberg related cluster on Redshift and you want to integrate that within your VS Code or Cursor integration, you can directly use this MCP from Postgre and connect it, and it works off the top. The fun part is that not only does it support Postgre, there are usual DB connector MCPs as well that can support. Yeah, so Postgre would have your SAPA base, your Vault DB, your all the Neon DB, everything. Everything that is Postgre based can be supported and can be integrated right inside your Cursor. So the fun part of this happens when you can actually run your SQL notebooks from within Cursor. Okay, so let's say you have your data definitions in your Databricks cluster. In Postgre as well, you would have one schema DB, or we're talking about large orgs, right? So they will usually have your schema definitions in one table that has like which table references what columns are there in which table, what is the definition of each column. So you can directly call all of that, create a CSV and add that into your context. Now what happens is that helps you directly create SQLs, and because your Postgre is linked to MCP, you can directly run SQL queries using Postgre, right? Um, so yeah, what is an MCP? It's a standard, for people who don't know, a standard protocol that defines how your AI models like Cursor, whatever, are supposed to interact with your DB. Now, what we will be doing is, so imagine that your entire data set is a 5 terabyte data set. So of course, you don't want Cursor to go through the 5 terabyte data set. This is going to exhaust your context length and it's going to be super expensive. But it's also important for Cursor to understand your data before it does any data analysis. So the second step is we will create some dummy data. How will we create dummy data is we will define what type of machine learning modeling we are doing. Now imagine you're doing some regression task, which means like you are forecasting some stock prices, etc. Right? So what you will be doing is you will be downloading some bits and pieces of the data. So let's say sporadic stock data. That could be your every Monday, every Tuesday. So one random Monday, one random Tuesday, one random Wednesday, one random Thursday. You can go each week. So last week's Monday, last to last week's Tuesday, last to last week's Wednesday, and so on. You take a daily data for at an hourly level, which is nearly 3,000 to 4,000 rows. I think that is a very sweet spot with, let's say, 10 columns, and that is a very sweet spot for Cursor. Remove all the ID columns. You can just use Cursor to do that. And after that, just ingest that into Cursor's context. Now, the good part about this is Cursor is able to identify how your data looks like. What you can also do is, let's say you have a classification task. So you would do some stratified sampling using Cursor, depending on your sample space. So is it like a cat versus dog classification? So you would take some cat pictures and some dog pictures, picture IDs. Or you could just take some, if there's multi-sample classification, that is like cat, dog, horse, elephant. So you would take like 4 different animal, 4 different picture IDs, sample it by some extremes, and then give it. Also, the best part that I do is I consider all the outliers. So the very first step before doing step 2 is I do an anomaly detection on my data. So I will give cursor all the anomalies, that this is how my maximum, minimum, median looks like. This is how my data looks like on average. This is how my data looks like on an anomalous front. And now you know more about my data. So use this information to create. Now, one part is because you'll be working many times with the same data. The good part that I would like doing is create a private GitHub gist. A GitHub gist is something that can easily be referenced from a cursor doc. We will talk more about it. But the good part about a GitHub gist is because you can just ingest it into cursor. Now imagine if you're working with a particular data set and things have happened in the data set. So the code base for creating that cursor doc plus the cursor doc about the data set, which is like a cursor's own definition of the data set. So you can just simply ask cursor that give me every single information that you have about this data set, which you would be later on utilizing to do any kind of data analytics or data science on it. And cursor will give you every context and keep going more, and you will have a long document saying everything. You can use that document, you can put that on a GitHub gist, and whenever you want to reference the exact same data set, you can just reference it back. Tell cursor to fetch another sample data from the entire data lake, which is multiple petabytes or terabytes, and then tell cursor to refresh the document. So what happens, you have a living document which you can ingest into anyone's cursor workflow, and uh, they can create notebooks with it. Yeah, any questions up until now?
Questions, anyone?
Just have one question.
Mm-hmm.
No. Yeah, I just have one question, which is, what do you do in case you have a paper, right, which you want to implement?
Yeah,
So-
I'll talk about it. Don't
Sure.
worry. Yeah, there's like, yeah, I've mapped out the whole workflow. So let's just stick to the data ingestion layer here. Okay. Yeah. Now, creating a notebook using cursor. Now, cursor has something unique called feedback in code. It can look at code, but code is very hard. With data science, what happens is the entire workflow changes. Now, suddenly you have plots to look at, PPTs to look at, Slack messages to look at, and other things. So, interestingly, what you can do is, because all of your plots are saved in the plots file, you can just tell cursor, hey, cursor, the ML model is not perfect for this use case. Can you create a dummy notebook to fix everything? The way I like to do it is I create a dummy notebook. I look at a dummy notebook. If the code looks perfect, and I'll just ask cursor, okay, cursor, fix these, and then create and update the current notebook file. The reason for that is people who use notebooks know this. The entire notebook has one global context, and it's super hard to run one cell after the other. So creating forked notebooks to kind of have a look at new alternative methods is the way data scientists use it. So there is just one stream of code. Any local variable created day before yesterday is still used today. And I know that is not the best coding practice, but that's how data science workflows usually work. So how I would like to do it is create a dummy notebook. On that dummy notebook, see everything, how it is going to look like in the grand scheme of things, and then come back to the original notebook. But if you are more brave than me, or if your notebook does not process 5 petabytes of data, 5 terabytes of data, then feel free to make it less cumbersome for yourself. Hmm. Yeah, so I have, see, like these are the rules that I have already added. So what kind of contracts I've created with Cursor for feature engineering, what kind of contracts I've created with Cursor for explainability. One thing I've noted is that adding the word contracts, so like we are creating this contract with each other, and this is what you are supposed to deliver, this is what I'm supposed to deliver, works out really well for Claude family of models, and also ChatGPT for some reason. So like drafting a legal type contract works really well for these models. So do what you want to do with this information. Now, the interesting part is cool. Now you have done all this. You want to do some kind of data engineering. Data engineering can be done on multiple tools. You can do it on DBT. People who are aware of DBT will tell you DBT is like a dynamic SQL query generator. It's like a complete data warehouse tool. Data engineering plus updating your data engineering code workflows, etc. DBT works really well with cursor off the top, so not a problem at all. Now there is something called Light Dash. So Light Dash and Tableau. You can see on the left, this is a Tableau dashboard. On the right, this is a prompt for Light Dash. Light Dash works out really well for cursor because Light Dash has its own MCP integration and it is designed for cursor. So what does Light Dash do? Now imagine if a company is looking at databases. So imagine when we were in the COVID era, there was a COVID database that we would look at how many cases have come and so on and so forth. Very much like that, companies look at their own dashboards. Now, these dashboards contain live information that keeps coming, or it can be a periodic dashboards that, let's say, your managers and CEOs just want to look at that. Okay, what has happened? So let's say when I was at the airline that I was working for, uh, we were looking at how many passengers are flying on a week-on-week level. How many passengers do we forecast will fly next week? What are the routes where we are going to see the most amount of congestion? What kind of passengers are facing issues? Where is our telecom operator doing a mistake? And we would use analytics plus AI models plus a lot of text to speech and NLP processing in order to kind of get one insight into one complete slide or one Tableau dashboard for our stakeholders. So the entire job of a data scientist, especially at a senior level, is to convert your story into one single line or one single story plot. Now, for this, you have tools like Lightdash and Tableau. Now, for that, you usually hire a business analyst or a data analyst whose job is to convert your data science models into dashboards that can be utilized by your stakeholders. Cursor can just do this for you. So Lightdash is something that smaller teams usually would prefer using. It's cheaper and it is enterprise friendly. It has MCPs and it is lighter. Tableau is something more enterprise. Now, one good part is if you have a Tableau dashboard that already exists within your company, Cursor is able to create live dashboards using HTML with Tableau. I've created a complete workflow, and I think I can share this PPT with you all if you want to use these notes as well. So I've created a complete workflow on what HTML um, libraries Cursor can use. Yeah, what HTML libraries and what tag does Cursor need to use? So I use ChatGPT to generate dummy code for this, but React plus Plotly plus WebSocket is the most commonly used. Plotly is a tool that does live plots. You can also use something called Nevo.rocks or something for making your plots look more interactive, D3JS, etc. So this integrated with React.js plus WebSocket. So if you have a WebSocket plus Plotly and a React UI to go with it, it is usually able to create Tableau-like dashboards. Now, how Tableau works is you usually send out a link to people to look at. All of these features are also available in Plotly. Combined with WebSockets, Cursor is able to one-shot good dashboards. So one thing that I like doing is I like putting my Tableau dashboards in my um, format as well. I can just ask Cursor that, hey, here is the color scheme, extremely important in my contract that you will always follow the color scheme. In this, you are going to create a dashboard that looks like exactly like this Tableau dashboard. It follows the color scheme. It has WebSocket integration. It has Plotly integration plus React and everything. So this is something that is there. Plus Fast API along with Plotly also works really well. Dash is another tool. So Dash does live plotting. What is live plotting? Which means that if your data changes in real time, Dash will also update the plots in real time. That is also a feature that Tableau has. So all of this and Light Dash, if your company lets you do, or Looker. Looker is another tool that you can use. It has its own markup language called Looker ML. Now, if you are a data analytics manager, you would be thinking that, okay, cool, sir, you have solved ingestion, you have solved notebook creation, you have solved EDA creation. Sure, I can reduce some kind of headcount over here. But how do I do feedback to Cursor? Now, the interesting part is every time something happens in Cursor, you have a plots and you have your internal CSVs. Your CSVs can be your AUC PRC scores, they can be your F1 scores, they can be your accuracy metrics, they can be your AUROC scores, they can be all of the evaluation metrics or evals that you have created, right? Evals is the word we all recognize, right? So just an evals that you have created for your machine learning models. You can actually refer this back to Cursor and tell it to perform a deep research on the internet to search for models or papers that beat the current model. This is exactly what data scientists do. Now imagine if I'm using a decision tree model or a random forest model and that model does not work very well for me. So I will use something called I model, scope rule classifier, GOSDT, 15 different kinds of model. How do I discover these models? I Google them. I look for enterprise research papers. So my favorite thing is that Cursor can actually do deep research. Um, how do we do this? So you just have to insert this rule in your Cursor, which says that you have to ask 3 relevant questions. You have to give it access to the web, and Cursor will usually be able to do as good of a job as Perplexity Research or any of these research tools. The only problem is there will be a human in the loop. The idea over here is that Cursor should be able to find archive links and it should also be able to find research papers or GitHub which contains, or Kaggle notebooks which contain information about the task that you are trying to solve. These are your only sources usually. Now, if all of these sources do not work out for you, then you are left on your own. In that case, of course, you would need an expert, but that is typically not the task of a junior. A junior with 4 to 5 years of experience would just do this kind of research. So that is something that Cursor can basically automate. And Cursor can create notebooks. Now, the good part about this is Cursor can do notebooks asynchronously. What asynchronously means is that Cursor can not only import these libraries, it can in real time also tell you which libraries are not installed on your environment. It can also add existing cells while you run the current cells. It can also in the background kind of review the local variable values. So you can use a Python debugger bridge and you can print out the values of the local, like depends on the kind of profiling you want to do, depends on the scale of data science assessment that you're trying to do. You can also profile it using weights and biases, etc., and we'll discuss about it. So on your MLOps pipeline, your weights and biases or your core weave, it will also have MCP access, but too complicated for this right now. What you can do is Cursor has these live notebooks. So very much like writing code, because a notebook file is essentially a JSON file, Cursor is able to create new cells, it is able to delete existing cells, and it is able to run full on notebooks by itself. Now, one of you asked me, how do you implement archive papers and implement deep learning models? One of the fun parts is we have excessive amounts of documentations on everything. Now, of course, if you have multi-GPU clusters and other things, there's not a lot of documentation. But if you want to implement a deep learning model, or if you want to have a deep learning model using PyTorch on Cursor, what you can do is you can just paste the reference image of how the neural net layers are going to look like your Keras or your TF or your PyTorch gives you a layer by layer picture. You can just use that computational graph picture and Cursor will be able to implement it. But if that also does not work out for you, Archive usually has an HTML render of the paper. The best part about Cursor is it is able to read those HTML renders. But even if those HTML renders fail for you, we'll discuss later on how you can convert that into markdown files, and using markdown files you can directly insert that into your context of Cursor and Cursor will be able to generate it. But on a larger level, Cursor is able to go through the HTML that is generated by Archive and it is able to look through it. The feedback loops on these ML models are within your MLOps pipelines, or they are within your @plots folder. One thing that you can do for Cursor is whenever you run a new cell, go back to the @plots folder, look at all the new plots that have been generated, analyze these plots, look at how the loss curve has fallen. If it has not fallen, update the model in the existing cell and rerun it. These kinds of prompts just work with Cursor off the top. You don't really have to do anything about it. Okay, now how to make PPTs on Cursor. Before that, some tips and tricks. Yeah, so how do you convert your PDF to Markdown? So you can use a tool like Marker to convert your PDF into Markdown. One of the other things is this Surya OCR works really well for ML research papers. Surya OCR and Marker are pretty much good enough for you. Another thing is like sometimes you have a GitHub repository of like, let's say, a tracker from RoboFlow, which has like 2000 different models. You don't need all of those models, or the N8N workflow, which has like every single library in the world in one GitHub repository. So you can just use something called uithub.com, which allows you to download a specific file from a GitHub. And you can also reference this file within your Cursor. Another thing is, yeah, so you can add a new document, and let's say you have like, let's say some light rag or some other tool that you're using, right? So you can just add like this light rag document, and in the entry point, you can put the GitHub gist. So for example, your data related gists are stored in your private GitHub gist because you can just link your Cursor and VS Code to GitHub. You can directly link the GitHub gist over there, and Cursor is able to borrow information from that. So you can use your GitHub gist or your GitHub notes as your as one of the sources from Cursor. Now, are there any questions up until now?
Any questions?
I have a question at the back.
Yeah.
Can I speak from here? Is it audible?
You can just speak.
Can you hear him?
I can kind of hear him. Yeah, no worries.
What?
Yeah, so you talked about using IPython notebooks, which are like you mentioned JSON format, right? Like I mostly use .py files with IPython markers like hash and %%. Like that's really well in terms of context. Unnecessary load of context like that is associated with IPython that gets rid of. So like, would you recommend using that? Like, that works really well in my case, but yeah, want to hear it from you because you have been working with loads of data. Like, how was your experience if you used it?
Yeah, can I please take it at the end? So I'll just finish
Yeah,
up this and then I'll just take your question. Yeah, sorry.
sure, sure.
Okay, awesome. So one of the other things that you can do in Cursor is you can create PPTs in Cursor directly. So you can just ask Cursor agents to create PPTs. Now, there are multiple ways to create PPTs. So in JS and HTML slide decks, you have something called reveal.js, which uses HTML markdown plus slides, and it is just able to create slides for you using marp, which has markdown plus slides. So this is like markdown slides. This also works out really well for you. Now, Python pptx is another library that is able to do it. So if you ask Cursor to do reveal.js, it will create something like this. If you ask Cursor to just directly create a presentation for you, Cursor will create this kind of presentations for you, which will have the next button as well. And these are simple HTML PPTs which are embedded inside of your websites. You can get XML out of them and you can load them into your PowerPoint file as well. And you also have a next and previous button over here. So this is directly supported within Cursor. Another thing is, um, another thing is there is some CI/CD and MLOps also that you can do in Cursor, which is Cursor natively supports Azure-based DevOps. So there is an MCP server for Azure DevOps that is natively supported in Cursor. So whatever compute clusters you have in Azure, all scaling and everything is directly supported. So especially for ML people, whenever is GPU is available for us, then keep polling for GPUs and give me a Slack message as soon as a GPU is available in your DevOps. Another thing is WAN-DB, that's weights and biases, which is generally used to monitor your deep learning workflows, also has its own MCP, which you can use in order to integrate with Cursor. And what that does is it is able to tell you, okay, it is able to execute sandbox code, do LLM evals for you, perform auto train for you, Hugging Face auto train, uh, create a WAN-DB report for you. So basically what this does is you get a data science driven report, and then you can use any of these libraries. I'll share this presentation with you all, but you can use any of these libraries to kind of create your own. I'll just take one more minute to just show you how one of these presentations look like. Allow me a second. I had created a PPT. Yeah. So you have this presentation. So this is just for some dummy slides, but you can just see that Cursor creates this embedded PPTs for you, and you can just share these PPTs also. And also Cursor creates PPTx PPTs as well. I don't have uh, the examples that would not violate my company policy. And I think I've run out of time. So I'll just stop sharing and we'll take questions. Yeah, thanks.
Do you want to
You
actually
want to ask the question?
ask the
You had a
question?
question, right? Yeah, I already asked.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think using a Python file works out really well. Yeah. I think for rapid prototyping for data science workflows, and I think your context would not usually get bloated because let's say you have 100 tables and for each table you store like 500 or 50 to 500 columns. That would usually be like 50,000 rows, and 50,000 rows is usually not that much context because you would be storing only relevant columns. So that comes out to be within 128K or 256K usually. But yeah, it depends on how large your workflow is. It can totally bloat up quite a bit. So in that case, of course, you can use independent Python files where you're just using each Python file having a link to its own current data, and you can just link them together. But that's it. Can we take more questions or are we over time?
Do we have any more questions? I think we are almost at
Yeah,
time.
I just wanted to, I was just wondering if you worked with the Snowflake MCP server for Snowflake data lakes.
Yeah, Snowflake.
That,
Yeah, there is Snowflake also. So I have worked with Snowflake, and Snowflake has its own VS Code integration. So I don't think you would need. I mean, you can work with the Snowflake MCP server, because they are currently supporting their Cortex AI on MCP and other things. But you can directly also use Snowflake within your VS Code. So why would you need a specific MCP server if it is natively supported?
Flaky. It
Yeah,
works.
yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's not as good as Redshift or one of the Postgres.
No, it's not. It's not. For any Postgre related DB is usually more supported. But also Snowflake, I don't know a lot of companies that use Snowflake apart from legacy banks, which will not let you use Cursor anyway. So you can't sell this service to them. Yeah. Anything else?
Anyone else any questions?
You are told like how to use gist from GitHub, right?
Yeah.
You are going to extend that.
Can you please come again?
You are going to extend.
Okay.
You are going to extend the .gist file. How to use that from GitHub with the cursor?
Yeah, sure. So no, what I said was that you can, so whatever is your persistent memory or your global memory of your data sets or anything like that, you can just offload that to a gist file and you can load that gist as a document. So I had already shared it. 1 second. I'll actually share this deck. So it has all the prompts and everything. But yeah, so you can just add new doc. So you can just go @docs, add new doc, and then you can provide the details for your GitHub gist. You can link to your GitHub gist and you can just literally reference. So whatever file you want to use, space light-track docs. So let's say it's called light-track docs. So you can just say light-track docs and it will automatically refer to the GitHub gist and it is able to just go through it.
I think, yeah, this was a pretty intense session, Ankit. Thanks for doing this. I know
Hey, no worries.
make it, but it was really great. Personally, I enjoyed it. A bunch of. Thanks for doing this. I think a
No
big
worries.
round of applause for Ankit for doing this. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
That's it.